Welcome to Money Talks. I'm Genevieve Westcott with the latest financial news from across New Zealand and around the globe. In this edition, holy smoke, hold the snow. What's the latest down south with our lambs and our calves? Here we go again. The Kiwi dollar steadies and consumer confidence rocks back in August to the highest level in 7 months. Are better times ahead? And in Europe, German and French leaders meet in Paris. They say no to Eurobonds, but we ask, what's the alternative to the European debt crisis? All this and much, much more coming up. Let's turn now to the most up-to-date market and commodity information with ASB rural economist James Shortall. And equity markets, James, have settled down over the past 7 days.
Yeah, well, I mean, compared to what we were talking about last week, there was a huge amount of volatility, but now we have started to see markets settle down a bit, and actually, through the latter part of last week and the early part of this week, then US markets in particular actually seen some increases, which is good to see.
And have we made up the losses of the previous week?
Well, pretty much we have. Apart from the last 24 hours where we have seen a few other things coming into the mix. You mentioned Europe. That's caused a few issues for equities overseas. But in general, all the losses that we saw last week have been evened out now, and we're back to sort of a level footing.
I'll tell you one thing the markets did like. That was news out of Japan that the economy isn't as bad as the world was thinking.
Well, that's right. I mean, that added to some better news that was happening. It's still pretty ugly in Japan. Their economy contracted, but it just didn't contract as much as most people were expecting, which I guess is in good news, in context with the earthquake and the issues that they have been facing.
And what about that $12 billion plus takeover offer from Google? The market went crazy for that.
Well, yes, that's right. I mean, when we're seeing so much volatility and issues around the world, the fact that Google, one of the biggest companies around, exciting company that are doing some fantastic things globally, if they've got confidence to go out there and make a big purchase, $12.5 billion US dollars, then they've got to have some confidence in where things are going, and markets certainly took that on board pretty well.
Okay, now over in Europe, even as we speak, they've just concluded a meeting between the prime ministers of Germany and France about the European debt crisis. What's the news out of there?
Yeah, well, this was always going to be a big focus because, we have been talking about the US and there's some big issues there, but also in the background, there's some fundamentally, huge issues coming out of Europe and some real concerns. So, the French and the Germans were meeting overnight to try and discuss this. And to be honest, there hasn't been a huge amount that's come out of it. They haven't come out and said, okay, we're going to do X, Y, and Z, and all the problems are going to go away. But what they have said is that they're looking at a finance tax that's going to that has really unsettled markets, and that's been a fundamental reason why we've seen equity markets fall over the last 24 hours.
Meantime, the Kiwi dollar here at home has been bumping around, settling at about what, 83, 84 cents?
Yeah, we've been trading in that sort of in that range, which is good news, I guess, in a lot of ways, because last week we were around 84, then we got down to in the 79s, and then back to 84. It was just all over the show. So we have settled in that sort of 83.5 cent mark there.
But you're still picking it to go up and up, aren't you?
Yeah, farmers probably won't like me saying this, but we are picking that because of the issues in the US. Their credit rating downgrade, the US Fed, what they're doing in the markets, as well as the slowing US economy. That's going to mean that the US dollar is going to be weak for some time, and in turn, there's going to be a lot of people wanting to get into Australian Kiwi dollars. And that's going to mean the Kiwi dollar is going to rise. We're picking that it's going to rise well over 85 cents against the US over the next couple of months, and it's going to stay around those levels probably through till at least the end of next year.
Let's talk dairy now. Global dairy trade auction results in overnight. Several months now of it being down. How's it looking?
Well, unfortunately, prices did drop again. On a trade-weighted basis, they were down 0.9%. So it's not a big drop, but still
But it's consistent, isn't it? It's coming down, coming down.
That's right, and that is a little bit concerning. I mean, prices are still really strong. So when we look at it on a historical basis, they are looking good right now. But to be honest, I would like to start to see US dollar prices lift pretty soon, and because the currency is high, and while we're sort of sitting in a phase now where we're still picking that $7 payout. If we don't start to see prices rise, then we could start to see some pressure coming on that price.
Well, corn and other soft commodities are starting to lift, so maybe dairy's going to follow suit.
Yeah, well, corn and some of the other agricultural commodities around the world have actually been, relatively stable compared to a lot of other equities and other commodities. So that is good news, but they've probably been trading on fundamentals more, which is I think is a good sort of thing to see around the world, given what we're seeing. So they have been a bit more stable, and they've really been driven off weather developments out of the US market. So whether we'll see dairy follow suit, it remains to be seen.
Thanks, James. Coming up after the break, we get a gold star for our economy from an American money expert. Our consumer confidence is going up, and good news, all signs are pointing to a recovery in the sheep numbers. Don't go away. Ponder this in our Farmers' Facts and Figures quiz. What agricultural sector is New Zealand's sixth largest industry? The answer when we return. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Money Talks. Just before the break, we asked you, what agricultural sector is New Zealand's sixth largest industry? Horticulture, worth $5 billion in trade, employing 50,000 people. It's been another crazy week on the markets with high volatility as the aftershocks from the downgrade of the USA whipsawed global financial markets. But the dust appears to be settling. Joining us now is NBR Editor-in-Chief Nevil Gibson. Nevil, what's your take on this week?
Well, I think it's a loss of confidence, not in the markets, and I've been spoken to a lot of people over the past week, and it's really a lack of confidence in the politicians and governments to solve the crisis. And we've just seen that in Europe, where the leaders of France and Germany get together. They say they're going to can't really solve the financial crisis, so they look at governance issues and a new tax. They're not really solving the fundamental one which the markets want, which is to reduce government spending and reduce the government debt.
Well, gentlemen, let me tell you this. If we think it's hard times here in New Zealand, over in America, it's good to know that some of their independent market analysts think that they need to be more like us, way down under. Listen up to the president of Euro Pacific Capital Inc., Peter Schiff. Take a listen.
I don't think the U.S. deserves to be AA+. After all, New Zealand is AA+. The New Zealand dollar is making record highs. Net public debt in New Zealand is about 10% of GDP. They're far more solvent than the United States. I would much rather buy New Zealand government bonds than U.S. Treasuries. So they're going to have to fix that. Maybe they'll upgrade New Zealand back to AAA at some point, or eventually downgrade the U.S.
Well, gentlemen, what do you think of that? An American market specialist who thinks that we ain't so bad down here, down under. James.
Yeah, well, there's not too many countries that are sort of AA+, along with the US. So we're in a pretty unique situation there, and it's kind of interesting to think that little old New Zealand can have the same credit rating as the US. But some interesting comments and some pretty valid points, to be honest.
What do you think, Nevil?
Well, I guess they look around the world, and we've always been linked to, in Americans' minds, in the money markets, with Canada and Australia, and that's not bad company to be in with their AAA ratings. So maybe we should be punting for a notch up before America gets it, and possibly if things go well for us after the election, we may well be heading in that direction.
Over in Italy now, the Prime Minister has gone ahead with big tax increases and spending cuts. Mamma mia! Is it really going to work?
Well, Italy's famous for, like Greece, for people not paying their taxes, but the system, broken down though it may appear to be, seems to work, and I guess collecting more taxes is really the secret in both those countries, along with Spain, and there's no doubt that they're pushing the Eurobond issue pretty hard too.
They're pushing it pretty hard, but as James, you were saying earlier, it looks like the big power players in Europe are still saying no. Is that the smartest decision, do you think?
Well, I think there's been some issues with the euro currency coming through, and it's sort of hidden a few problems. So in the short term, we've still got a couple of strong countries that could be weakened by some of those measures. And are we just going to be masking over or putting a band-aid over the bigger, wider issue? I guess that's going to be the concern. And if there's going to be a time when it is going to be needed, perhaps perhaps now isn't the time, maybe it might be in the future, but there has to be some other solutions to come out to try and settle the markets down a little bit at the moment.
Yeah, those are going to be along two lines. One is more economic integration, and certainly France and Germany have agreed that that's the way they want to go. They want to raise more tax from financial transactions, so you can see that there's money coming in. I think they also need, and they haven't made this step yet, to set the European Central Bank up as a proper bank that can issue bonds. At the moment it's got permission to buy a few from Spain and Italy, but that's not really, it doesn't function like the central bank does in the United States or here.
Meantime, China's exports hit a record high in July. They continue to be a powerhouse. That's got to be good for them. Is it good for the rest of the world?
Well, it's good for us. That's certainly the case, I think, and that's probably the question going forward. I mean, China is becoming more and more, we talk about this a lot, very, very important to New Zealand, and it's been very important to Australia as well. So the fact that they're still steaming along ahead is good news. I guess the key question that I've got is if are we going to see a bit of a buttoning off in their economic growth because of their some of their main export markets being the US and some of the other developed countries?
Yeah, that's the thing, because with so much of the world doing so poorly, how is it possible that their exports are still so strong? Nevil?
Well, they're looking at the global world, not just those developed markets. And the activity in Africa and South America, we often overlook these countries, but they've got booming economies. The Chinese are very active there, and of course in the growth areas of Asia, to a lesser extent Middle East. So I mean, they really are global players, but really at the early start of the game.
Meantime, here at home, boys, it looks like 4 out of 12 economists think that the Reserve Bank is going to hike the rates in the very near future. Make sense to you?
Well, I think their last. If we go back and have a look at their last statement, then they said that they would be looking to raise rates depending on where the financial markets. They're definitely hinting, but depending on where the financial markets sort of settle down, and we've seen financial markets explode effectively over the past week. So that's really changed what's been going on, and they may just need to wait a little bit just to see things settle down to make sure that a lift at this point in time is the right move. At some point they do need to lift because the New Zealand economy is really starting to get going, and there are some inflationary pressure starting to pick up, so there will need to be a lift. It's just whether or not the next meeting is going to be the right one, or perhaps later on the year.
And across the ditch, Neville, over in Australia, what's the Reserve Bank up to there? Well,
they held their rates, but they're certainly higher than they are here, because there is quite a worry there about part of the domestic economy there seems to be going backward. And so that's the major fear there, is the domestic one. But of course the mining exports are doing really well, as are the agricultural ones. So it's a bit of they've really got the two-speed economy. I'm not quite so sure though that this lack of confidence in the domestic economy in Australia will continue for much longer if other things going well.
One thing that the Australians have always done well is having, of course, a great pension plan that Aussies have been paying into for a number of years. Here we've got KiwiSaver, and interesting that because of the May budget changes to KiwiSaver here, it's really knocked confidence among Kiwis. What do you make of that, James?
In essence, I still think KiwiSaver is a great savings program, great retirement program, great for New Zealand. And
even though we have to pay more into it now?
Yeah, I mean, it's not such a bad thing that we're saving more, to be honest.
Do you want to pay mine? Neville, he'll pay yours too.
Well, it's the employers that are paying in more too.
Yeah, that's right. They are as well, yeah.
But I think there is quite a push, though, to educate people about KiwiSaver. It is not government guaranteed, and it's dependent on returns from the market, so people have to, and I don't think the government subsidising it is necessarily a good thing in the long run anyway. Yeah, because that's just the money go around, because it has to reduce its deficit. We'd like to pay less in tax, so you've got to get rid of the money around it, and so the KiwiSaver investment's actually making a return on their own.
And let's face it, the changes mean that the government's going to save something like $2.6 billion over the next 4 years.
We need that. We need that right now, in my opinion. And the KiwiSaver is still a great. It's still a good program. It was probably a great program before for for savers out there. But I think it was probably required.
Meantime, turners and growers didn't have any luck at all in High Court, trying to persuade them that Zespri needs to deregulate a little bit. No surprises there, Neville.
Well, the full report hasn't come out from the courts, which is interesting. Zespri put out a press release and crowed about it, and Turners and Growers have said nothing.
They're saying nothing. Isn't that funny?
So, and I haven't been able to speak to anyone there to tell me just what their tactic is now. But it isn't the end of the story, that's for sure.
Is there any merit to Turners and Growers pursuing this?
Well, they think there is, because Turners and Growers are essentially getting into growing kiwi fruit, and they want to be exporting their own varieties, and they've got a supply chain that makes them into markets, and really they're just, but they're a very small player in kiwi fruit, but it's a growing sector, and I think Zespri can put up with a little bit of competition. Fonterra have been able to foot it with the small people eating away at them and without any real cost to them.
Meantime, Zespri has other bigger fish to fry, if you like. This PSA has been spreading like crazy over winter. It hasn't been cold enough here to kill it off. What's the latest there, Neville?
Well, it's a huge problem, and that's probably the focus there. And there are two programs. There's a Zespri government one, and then other growers so that they can more effectively do it with another version. So other growers have gone out on their own, but it's also hurt crops all around the world. So it's not just our problem.
One problem that we have, according to the Greens, is that we're paying way too much, James, at the moment for our fruit and veg in the supermarkets. Incredible markups, apparently, 200, 300%, the Greens are saying. What do you make of it?
Well, I mean, the food prices, I guess, have been rising for quite a while, and there's inquiries going into milk. Meat prices, of course, go into the supermarket, they're pretty high also. Sure, the farmers are probably the first ones to say that they're not the ones that are getting the benefits of high prices.
Exactly. They say, high retail prices, but they're still struggling, the growers and producers.
Yeah, I mean, in some ways you come back to, the market power. We talk about Zespri, and, they do have some selling power into the markets. I guess some of those vegetable and fruit growers, and they don't necessarily have that same market power with some of the different industries. So
there's a lot of costs just because of the farm gate, because actually if you're just growing something there mightn't be as many inputs as you like, but once you take it away from there and you have to get it to the market, you've got a lot of costs in freight and refrigeration, and you cannot sell spoiled fruit. There's wastage and that sort of thing. If you look at the problem in, say, Africa, plenty of food is produced in Africa, but they're starving because of wastage and that sort of thing. So I think the Greens are really playing a bit of a low ball here. They did a survey a year ago, and there's no real facts and figures from actual growers, and I notice that the grower associations do not necessarily support it, other than you comparing two prices, the retail price with the grower price. But it's far more complex than that.
We do, when you see we're supplying a premium product into the markets, and certainly the consumer here at home in New Zealand, and they want to have an A-grade quality product. If it's got any blemishes, then they don't want it. So
how crazy is that?
That's got to add a whole huge amount of cost into that supply chain.
And a lot of these vegetables are sold in the market. So I mean, it's a market prices. You can go to Turners and Growers, for example, and buy tomatoes. If they're in oversupply, you're going to be paying big dollar. You're going to be paying much less than if there's an undersupply.
Well, I bet they wish they were arable farmers, because apparently that the farmers here, the arable guys, are riding the crest of the dairy wave. James.
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess they are making some gains because, especially in those areas, Canterbury has been a hugely developing dairying area, but the arable farmers are also, off the back of that, been able to grow more crops, winter crops for dairy cows, and it has certainly given them a little bit of a boost, but they've had a couple of pretty tough years with some of the grain prices, so, it's good to see them, making some gains.
According to MAF, the report they've done, they're now picking a 91% increase in profits before tax to $363,000 for 2011-12. Not bad.
Looks pretty good to me.
It's very good. Those figures are quite interesting, aren't they? Because they went through quite a number of different farm sectors. They have a model and they apply it, and I think it was apple growers and one other where they're unprofitable, and vineyards, of course, are not very profitable either.
And a little more good news. Looks like our sheep numbers are going to be recovering, although with the bad weather down south, wait and see for that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's a big question at the moment. The good thing is in a lot of the big areas, and they haven't started lambing yet. So, we may not see the significant losses that we did see last year when those storms came through, just a little bit later on when those lambs were coming through. But, I guess meat in New Zealand and beef and lamb, then they are picking that. We're going to see a lift in lamb numbers.
Yeah, I think by 1.4 million for this spring's crop.
It's still well below, what we've typically do, an improvement on last year, but last year we have to remember was an ugly year in terms of numbers. But we will see a little bit more supply coming into the market. What that'll do for prices, interesting to see. But farmers may be able to make some pretty good gains this year.
Stand by. Coming up after the break, future-proof on the highways and byways of the economic world. Our experts tell us what they'll be tracking over the next 7 days. But first, a question for you in our Farmers Facts and Figures quiz. How much did overall sheep numbers drop in the 2010-11 year? Find out after the break. Stay with us. Welcome back to Money Talks. Just before the break, we asked you, how much did overall sheep numbers drop in the 2010-11 year? Sheep numbers dropped 2.1% to 31.9 million. And now it's time for Future Proof. What's coming up for our experts? Nevil, I'll start with you.
We're in the midst of the company reporting season, and it's usually a very good indicator for not just how companies have been performing, but what we can look forward to. And in the rural area, we're looking at results coming up this week and next week from Cavalier. Their exports of carpet to Australia, for example. Delegates, how the wine exporting is going, and both those companies look to be producing good profits. We've had excellent profits from Main Freight and Freightways, which says that people are exporting lots of goods overseas, and that's a good sign.
Fantastic.
And then there's one or two special situations. Heartland brings out a result, but it won't really reflect the future of that.
Pretty early days, isn't it? Pretty early days for that.
Another company undergoing quite a transformation is PGG Wrightson, having sold off their finance arm to Heartland, and so there'll be more news on that. And the big one on Friday will be Telecom, which affects everyone, on just what the news is going to be there.
What do you reckon? You got pretty good sources.
It's going to be interesting splitting the company and just how they're going to chorus and the retail arm. It's going to be, people are crunching the numbers.
Good news about the corporate sector, because of course in America, and we've talked about this, James, recently, they're doing very well as well.
Yeah, I mean, the US corporates, seem to be churning out good amounts of money at the moment, boosted by, a lot of other areas around the world doing pretty well. A low US dollar means that they can, their exports are, and when they bring their profits back, then it, makes quite a big difference for them. So it's good news. I guess the key question there is going to be whether they, and this is probably something that I've been harping on about, is whether they decide to invest back at home in the US, or whether they would invest elsewhere. And in my eyes, it would make more sense to invest elsewhere where those economies are going well, and to provide to really get those benefits. So whereas here at home in New Zealand, then some of these companies seem to be doing pretty well off the back of a bit of an improvement in our economy.
Yeah, and where should the companies here at home, Nevil, be putting their money?
Well, they're all keeping them powder dry, I think. The only big spenders at the moment seem to be the Japanese. Have moved into New Zealand. They've are buying up yet another food company.
Tell us more. Tell us about that.
Well, there's one deal I did want to talk about, and that's Nomura buying the loan book of South Canterbury Finance. So that's quite an interesting one. But Asahi are the main buyers, it looks like, for Independent Liquor, which is our number 3 company, mainly known for RTDs, but it's got quite a large beer operation as well. So, of course, Lion's already owned by Kirin, another Japanese company, so they're really keeping a close eye. And Charlie's has also been sold to a Japanese company, so they're very active here.
They're going from strength to strength, and all this with a devastating quake. How do they do it?
The Japanese, they've got lots of money.
And the
yen has been very strong, and of course their exports have been suffering. But they're very good, and they've learned how to operate in the West over many years. Chinese have still got a lot to learn. And I was speaking to a lawyer on that this week from Shanghai, and And he admitted that the Chinese companies have not been able to expand. The only investment one company, Bright Dairy, has made in the entire world is the one into synlait milk.
Isn't
so
that
New Zealand,
something?
yet again, has made a bit of a historic a turn in China.
So does that mean that we're a bit of a soft touch here?
Oh, I don't think so. No, it was a very wise investment from our point of view. But the Chinese need to learn that there's a softly approach to this. Also, they can't go around. They're very keen on understanding how the system works and public opinion. They realise that buying up farms isn't necessarily the way to go.
Yeah, not great PR. Sort of like Adidas and that jersey. We won't talk about it this week. All right, gentlemen, thank you very much. Thanks to my guests, ASB rural economist James Shortall and NBR editor-in-chief Nevil Gibson. Be sure to check out our website. Meantime, ain't it the truth when you feel good, you sing good? Especially with a kind word and a helping hand. Check it out, James. Keep the faith. See you next time.